In this broadcast, I'm going to be making some announcements for you. I'm also going to be going over some technical things like how to clean your Designing Stylus when it gets really dirty. There's a question that came up as a result of the last live broadcast in September about notches. We'll be talking about that. And I'm also going to be talking about a specific fitting issue where we're going to split the back of the pattern. And so with that, let me go ahead and make my first announcement. I'm really delighted to tell you that we now have a trained, certified SureFit Designs teacher in Illinois. Her name is Kate Millar, and she is found in Naperville, Illinois. Her website is www.classicsewing.com, and you can reach Kate via her email, which is kate@classicsewing.com. She's already started offering classes. You're going to see classes, more SureFit Designs classes coming up with her in November, and then she'll pick it up again in January after the holiday season. And then the other instructor who I'm training virtually, her name is Jane Schmidt, and she owns Jane's Sew Central on Merritt Island in Florida. Jane is going to be starting to offer classes in November, and I imagine she's going to skip for December and then pick it up again in the new year. Jane's website is janessewcentral.com, and you can get a hold of Jane at info@sewcentral.net. So when you do talk with our new teachers, give them a big warm welcome, and it's just really exciting to see how SureFit Designs is spreading throughout the United States. Now, another announcement that I would like to make is for all of you folks who are down under. We have a special broadcast coming up for you on October the 24th. Now, for those of you who don't know what down under means, that's for all of our customers in New Zealand and Australia, and also any customers that are in the South Pacific Islands like the Philippines or Malaysia. On October the 24th, I will be doing a 90-minute broadcast for SureFit Designs Australia in conjunction with the Australian Sewing Guild. Their tag is ASG, just like ours is here, but ours is, of course, American Sewing Guild, theirs is Australian Sewing Guild. Now, it's going to be held on October the 24th, and the time will be noon in Queensland. Now, what does that mean for me broadcasting here in the United States? Well, it's 8 p.m. at night, and it's going to go till 9:30 at night on Friday night because they are 16 hours ahead of us and, of course, going into the next day. And so it's going to be a little late for you ladies in the United States, even though there are a couple people from the United States who have already registered for that. What we are planning on doing is offering this same 90-minute broadcast, very different from what I'm going over today. It's primarily for newbies. I'm going to be showing you how to work with the SureFit Designs dress kit. And consequently, the presentation is going to be 90 minutes long, and there is a nominal fee to register, and that's just simply going to help us to cover costs of the production and the broadcast. But you're all going to get it back anyway because we are giving you gifts, a design and sew along, as well as a coupon to go back into the store and shop and use your admission fee. But for those of you who are new to SureFit Designs and you're in either Canada or the United States, your presentation is going to be on November the 15th. So hold up, after the 24th of October, we'll start advertising and letting you know the specifics for November the 15th for Canada and the United States, because we're all on the same time zone, as you can well appreciate. So for October the 24th, just remember, those of you who are down under, it's going to be noon Queensland time, and I look forward to having a lot of you attend. It'll be great to see you. You know, we traveled extensively in Australia and New Zealand, and it will be wonderful to reconnect with all of our customers down there. We're doing something interesting today. We're simulcasting for the first time. And for those of you who don't know what that means, it means that we're broadcasting on Facebook in our Facebook page, and automatically it's going into our Facebook group as well as into the SureFit Designs YouTube channel. And this is, as I said earlier, this is a 30-minute presentation. If you've got your questions, please go ahead and answer them. You've got the questions. I'm supposed to have the answers. Kelly, who is my office assistant, is here with us today, and she's answering questions along with our UK distributor, whose name is Judith Johnson. It's only 7 hours ahead in the UK, so it's 7 p.m. at night, and Judith is here answering questions as well. So if between Kelly and Judith, they don't answer your questions, if there's anything left at the end, then I will go ahead and answer them. But also realize that because this presentation is free, that it will be replayed on our Facebook group, on my Facebook business page, which is SureFit Designs, as well as in my YouTube channel. So you'll be able to watch it at your convenience as many times as you want to if there's information that you didn't pick up the first time around. Okay, so the next thing that I would like to announce is that we are entering into our annual biggest sale of the year, and that's our tracing vellum sale. We are doing a BOGO 50. What does that mean? It means that you buy one and get the second one at 50% off, whether it be the 24-inch long vellum, which has 20 yards in it, or whether it be the 18-inch wide vellum that has 50 yards in it. BOGO 50. In the United States, you can't combine sizes, but I will tell you what, a lot of people go for 2 of the 20-yard and 2 of the 50-yard, and you know what? It's likely going to last you till next year's annual vellum sale. And because you are watching and participating today, this vellum sale, it's actually starting tomorrow, but for everyone watching today, you can go ahead and start making your purchases. And so where you do that is on, actually all of our distributors are participating in this particular annual sale. So you can go, if you're in like South Africa, go to surefitdesigns.co.za. In the UK, it is surefitdesigns.co.uk. In Canada, it's surefitdesigns.ca. And Australia is surefitdesigns.com.au. And of course, in the United States, it's surefitdesigns.com. Where you're going to find this tracing vellum is if you scroll to the top of the page where the navigation links are, go to shop, and then I'm not sure how many tabs down, it's the essential tools. Click into essential tools because that's what this tracing vellum is definitely an essential tool. And depending on the display in your particular device, you may need to scroll to the bottom of the page to see the buy one, get one at 50% off. And then tomorrow morning, very early, the actual newsletter is going to come out announcing the tracing vellum sale, and then we will be shipping on Monday. And as I said before, this only happens once a year, and it's an opportune time to stock up on tracing vellum. And yes, you do need to pay for shipping and handling. Unfortunately, I'm not Amazon or Costco where we can offer free shipping. The vellum is a heavy item. We keep our shipping prices as low as possible, and as it is, the amount that you are charged for shipping doesn't even begin to cover what we actually have to pay. And we just got another notice that said postage is going up again on October the 18th. So make sure you get your order placed now. Okay, so now let's talk about cleaning this Designing Stylus. You all know that I ask you to draw in pencil. And as a result of that, what happens is you can see these graphite marks on the back of the stylus, and I'll just make a little bit more marking. Not that you'd ever go and scribble on the Designing Stylus like that, but You know, you get the graphite on your fingers, it gets on the stylus, and then you have a hard time washing it off. A few years ago, I actually did a cleaning the Designing Stylus video for you, and there I used the Mr. Clean Magic Sponge, I think it's called, and that did an adequate job, but this product here, Undo, does a phenomenal job of cleaning off the graphite. A few weeks ago, I did do a video on this, but for any of you who are new to SureFit Designs, you may not have seen that video, so I just wanted to talk about it in this broadcast today because this is actually amazing. There was a lady who came to one of my private retreats, and a few months later, she said, Glenda, I found something to clean this darn Designing Stylus. It's called Undo. One of the things I don't like about this bottle is it's got this scraper on it, because this is kind of like intended for when you get gunk on things, so you can come along and scrape. And I will do a little bit of scraping on here, and it's starting to remove the graphite, but you know what just works equally as well as scraping is to take a paper towel and then just simply, look at that, it's like magic, isn't it? Look at this, it just cleans it up unbelievably well. Now I only put this Undo right there and right there, but you can see that as I'm rubbing across the Designing Stylus, it's really, really doing a great job of cleaning it. You can see the gunk that's on the paper towel there. So, and you can also notice that I put a towel on my working surface. I didn't want any of that getting on my board that I'm actually going to cut on. And one other thing I should mention is that one of the things in a previous video, or maybe it was a post we did, I'm not exactly sure, I said don't use anything that's got a solvent in it because a solvent will take off all this valuable printing and telling you how to match things up with your pattern. But this Undo, it takes off the graphite. I'll just put a little bit on the ink here and I will rub on that, and you can see that it doesn't take the ink off. So it just cleans the Designing Stylus. It's absolutely great. So for those of you who didn't see the video before, there you go, a little tip for cleaning the Designing Stylus. Let me just move all of that out of the way. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is a question that came up as a result of last month's live broadcast, and that was about notches. Oops, I want to get rid of this towel too. Okay, so now you can really see this pattern a lot better. Notches and SureFit Designs. I had a customer email me after the live broadcast, and she said, you know, I wanted to ask about notches, but I didn't have an opportunity, and I thought, well, that's a perfect topic to bring up in this broadcast. SureFit Designs doesn't have a lot of notches on the master patterns, but we do have some, and where the notches are found are in critical matching areas. So as an example, here's the back of the bodice right here, and you can see it's got a double notch in the back armhole. Now that double notch, of course, is indicating the back of the armhole. So then when you take a look at the sleeve pattern, on the back of the sleeve pattern, it's also got a double notch. And so, of course, when you're sewing the sleeve to the bodice, you're going to be matching these double notches like this to join them together. So when a notch is needed in SureFit Designs, in the master patterns, they are there. And yes, you do need to copy them. But for something like this long side seam, well, I shouldn't say it's long. It's really not that long, not like a long pant leg seam. When you go to sew it together with the front side seam, you're just making the assumption that they're the same length and that you don't need a notch, because the whole purpose of the notch is to help you join the two corresponding pieces. So if it's a short seam, you don't really need a notch. But let's say that you want to make a yoke on the back of this pattern. So let me slide this down a little bit more into the viewing area. So let's draw a yoke on here, and let's say this is kind of like maybe a Western style yoke. We'll take it from the upper portion of the armhole, and I'm going to draw this yoke to center back. So that would be a V-shaped yoke. Now, before you cut it apart, now you do want to make some matching notches to help you join this back together. So you say, well, where do I put my notches? Well, the truth is it doesn't really matter, but in practicality, if you were to put a notch here and here, they're too close together. They're not going to give you enough space to play with in order to match these seams. So more likely, you would place a notch about right there and about right here, so that when these pieces are cut apart, you'll see how to connect them back together real quickly. And usually, if you've watched some of my other videos, I just make X's like that, and then all you need to do is cut apart on this design line, and I'll just cut this apart all the way across, and then, of course, you need to add tracing vellum underneath and tape it in place. And I am removing this removable tape, so if you get something not quite accurate enough, don't worry about it. You can always lift the tape up and it's not going to tear. And then I need my Designing Stylus back here. Let me just reach it from underneath here. So the next thing to do after you have added your tracing vellum in place is to add a seam allowance. So we will mark in that 5/8 inch seam allowance like this, and then all you're going to do is extend that matching notch coming up like that. So that puts the seam allowance in place and puts the matching notch on. And of course, you would do that same thing on the other side. So I'll just do this real quickly. Tape it down. Oops. And add the seam allowance. Like this. Extend the matching notch. Now, when you cut out your pattern here, you can see that you're going to be sewing the yoke together with the bodice. So if this is a right side and this is a right side, you just turn them over and match your matching notches. So the whole purpose of a matching notch is to help you reposition the pieces that you have cut apart and sew them back together in the correct position. So the truth is, you can add a matching notch wherever you want it. So as you're drawing off your Sure-Fit Designs patterns, if it doesn't have enough matching notches for you, please feel free to add one wherever you think it's going to help you join the corresponding piece. Okay, so let's go on to the next topic, and that is splitting the back of the bodice. Now, why in heaven's name would you want to split the back of the bodice? Well, it might be because you are getting a drag line on the back of the bodice. So let's take a look at this fitting issue. I'm likely going to need that, so we'll tuck that under there. In this photograph, you are seeing fold lines coming up from the side seam and pointing towards the center of the back. So that's a telltale sign that we've got some rounding in the back and we need to give the back more length. Now, I can't quite see the neckline, but there is likely a possibility that this neckline also needs to get a little bit higher. So that's an obvious when you're taking a look at the back view of your bodice. Now, here is, let me move these out of the way for the time being. Here is another side view, and you're seeing a fold line coming up. Again, this is very similar to the blue bodice. You're seeing a fold line come up from the underarm, pointing a little bit higher up towards the back shoulder blade. Now, this particular situation, you might ask yourself, well, couldn't it be that the armhole is too tight? And it might be. But please keep in mind that when you start sewing this sleeve together, you're going to put on a 5/8 inch seam allowance around here to insert the sleeve. So that's going to get rid of and remove 5/8 of an inch of space there. And so that may help to relax the underarm. And if it does, and you still see these folds coming up towards the center of the back, then that means you need to split the back. So let's take a look at, first of all, the result of splitting the back in these photographs, then I'm going to show you how to do it. This is the same white blouse that I just showed you right there, and you can see right here that this back is split open about 3/4 to 1 inch, and it goes to nothing at the side seam. That's stable. It doesn't get opened up at all. We want to maintain the same depth and circumference that we have in that armhole, so no change happens there. It just happens in the center back. And you can see how that completely removed the diagonal wrinkle that was coming up from her underarm. The other thing is, when you're doing your first test toile or muslin or garment, however you want to describe it, and you test it when you're in the sleeveless stage, it really is an unfair test for how the armhole is fitting, because that armhole, as I said before, still needs to have 5/8 of an inch sewn out when the sleeve gets set in place. So just always keep that in mind. Now here, I actually did this for a customer who came to one of my private retreats. You can see that we split the back open. This was about 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch. That's all she needed, to nothing at the side seam. So now let's take a look at how to actually do that split. I've got another bodice back here for you to take a look at. And now, because I'm going to spread open in the center of the back, I'm going to do this approximately 1/3 of the way down. And what is going to be your guideline as to where to put the split in is where those diagonal folds are actually pointing on the back. And so I've taken the SureFit Designs line drafter. I've just lined up one of the dominant lines right on center back, and I'm going to come across in the middle of the armhole area. And I'm going to draw a line going across like that. And that's going to be my split line. Now, the pivot point is going to be the armhole. So because that's a pivot point, I'm going to just put a stabilizing piece of tape over top, and I now need to cut this open, and because I'm cutting only to the armhole, I'm trying to leave a little hair of the tracing vellum right there, and then I'm going to cut through the center back and up to the armhole like this. And now I want to use that armhole as a pivot point. So you can see that it's spreading open like this. So it leaves the integrity of the armhole all in place. The shape of it changes, but just slightly. So now we're going to tape the tracing vellum behind it, because we are going to open this up. I'll often tape the bottom cut line first, just to stabilize this, like that. And then I'm going to just take a measure, a rule here, and I'll do this in the bright pen again. I'll spread this one open 3/4 of an inch, which is right there. And then I'll line that up and just tape that in place. Now, how wide do you know to spread this open? Well, you can see that we did this test right directly on the test garment. We cut the fabric right across, leaving hinges at the armhole, and then opened the fabric up, and we actually inserted a piece of fabric, just like I'm doing with the tracing vellum here. And then I sewed that in white thread. I'm not really sure whether you can see that on camera or not, but I sewed it with white thread so that it would be a little bit more obvious that we inserted a piece of fabric back there. Start with about 3/4 of an inch. You can tell afterward whether that was enough to open it or not, because if you still get drag lines, then it wasn't enough. And so I'm just going to put a little bit more tape holding this in place. Now, let's take a look at the consequence of doing that. This upper neck area moved at an angle. So if I take my line drafter and hold it going straight up like this, you can see the consequence of shifting and adding that space at center back. It moved this forward. And you know what? This is interesting. I don't have my straight of grain on this particular sample, but straight of grains are always parallel to the center back. So what are we going to do? Well, if you have a very, very rounded back, then you're going to actually curve that center back seam, and it would look, well, let me get this going in a better direction here. It would look something like this to curve that seam. And if you have a really, really rounded back, then that's what you need to do. If you curve the center back seam, it means that you need to have a seam allowance, and then you'll always have a seam going down the center of your back. But let's say you just needed a little bit of length. You've got a minimal rounded back. You needed a little bit of length, but not to the extent of actually curving that center back seam. Well, let's straighten this out and see what happens if I straighten it out. So if I connect from the waist point up to the original neck point, now what I've done is I have lengthened the back right here. I've still put the center back on the straight of grain, which means that it now can be put on the fold of the fabric. You wouldn't have to have a seam, but you can see what I've lost here. I've lost that little bit of fabric right in there. And if you need it, you can go back to the arm side and you could flatten out this curve a little bit more right in here to compensate for what you lost in the back here. So it does change the shape of the arm side, but it's picking up most of what you lost at the center back. So that's one way. Actually, that's now two ways to compensate for this opening. And then, of course, if you do this, then you need to draw a new straight of grain for your, for fabric and layout purposes. So I would just use the line drafter, and then I would put a new straight of grain marking here, totally parallel to that green line, and that would be your new straight of grain. Now we have another option, and I'll do this other option in red, and hopefully you can see the difference. So what I'm showing you is 3 different ways to deal with the consequences of opening up your back at center back. I'm going to start right at the waist point. I hope you can see that. And I'm going to go straight up the original center back line right here. And so let me draw this line in red. All right, when I do that, that kept center back straight. I didn't have to then shift and make a new straight of grain marking, but what's the consequence of doing what I just did? It's that I added that much space to the, what did I put my little ruler here? Here we go. It added on 1/2 inch right at the neck. So that means your neck circumference just got bigger. So what you now can do is put a little neck dart in here like that. Usually a neck dart doesn't need to be very long, and that neck dart now removed the amount of space that you just added up at the top. If you have a shoulder dart, then you could also take that neck dart and put it into the shoulder dart, or you might want to make a yoke going across and take that dart and move it into a yoke. And in the Sure-Fit Designs learningcenter.com, where we have, gosh, over 300 free videos, one of the free videos that I show you how to do there is to take a shoulder dart and move it into a yoke, so that then all of this would go away. It would be all hidden in the yoke. So at any rate, those are 3 different ways to compensate for splitting the back open, and now I hope that takes the fear out of doing that kind of a refinement or tune-up for your pattern and getting your pattern back to fit your back beautifully. Okay, well, as we start to close this presentation, let me remind you of 2 things. Number 1, our annual tracing vellum sale. You are certainly welcome to start purchasing today, and you'll find that at surefitdesigns.com. Go over to shop, go to essential tools, scroll down the page till you see the BOGO 50. This sale is going to be on until Sunday night, midnight. So for those of you watching, you've got, 3.5 days to go ahead and get stocked up in vellum for the coming year. And then also, please, for all of those of you who are watching perhaps the replay down under, I know in Australia and New Zealand right now it's about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Don't forget that October the 24th is going to be your live broadcast in conjunction with the Australian Sewing Guild, and it's primarily for newbies who have not experienced Sure-Fit Designs before. I will be showing you how to blueprint your body shape and size using the Sure-Fit Designs dress kit. Well, that does bring me to the close. Whoops, and before I sign off, I want to just see if there's any questions that I need to answer. I know Judith and Kelly have been answering questions here, and let me just see. Looks like there's a question coming up on the monitor here, and I just need the type to be a little bit bigger. And our production crew is working right now to get the font a little bit bigger so that I can see it. There we go. I have to laugh. That's cute. Where did Glenda get her wrist pin cushion? I know you see me wear this all the time. It's my favorite. My other one was totally falling apart. I think I got it at Joann Fabric Store. Okay, and then the rest of this says the ones at Joann's, I shouldn't really say are dreadfully fitted, but I really do think this is where I got mine. I do have to laugh about that. Okay, and is there another question? Okay, what amount of opening would absolutely mean I have to have, oh, that's a really good question. The question is, what amount of opening would I have to have at center back in order to require a center back seam? Well, I would suggest that likely after about 1 inch, you're going to need that. Again, I need a center back seam. If you go to sfdlearningcenter.com and go into our article library, there is an article in there on dealing with a very, very, very rounded back. There was a woman who came to one of my 6-day retreats who had a very large rounding towards her upper back. And I know for sure we split the pattern open twice. once about right here and once about right there. And I think each of them we had to open up either 3/4 or 1 inch. But I have had ladies who have needed 1.5 inches, 2 inches of opening. There was a woman who came to one of my retreats, a different lady who she was in a walker, and so she was really hunched over her walker all the time. So you can just imagine how rounded her back was. I think we needed to open up the back 3 to 4 inches. In something that's severe like that, you absolutely will need to have a center back seam. But I think up to about 1 inch, you can likely get away with a couple of my other options. Okay, let's see. Will you be doing the same presentation in the USA like in Australia? The answer to that is yes. And that's what I was saying at the beginning of this broadcast, is that the 90-minute presentation for newbies for Australia, we are going to most likely repeat that again on November the 15th for Canada and the United States, because Canada and the US are on the same time zone. And then we'll have the similar gifts, etc., that are happening in Australia. So if you're in the US or Canada watching this and you are totally new to SureFit Designs, just wait until after the 24th, which is only next Saturday, and then we'll start advertising November the 15th. And let's see the next one. What do you do if your back length needs to be shorter? Okay, if your back length needs to be shorter, then what you need to do is usually shortening it is coming from the waistline area. And so I don't have a photograph to put up for that right now, but typically if this was in fabric, you would be able to pinch out the excess that you don't need in the back of your body and let it flow to nothing at the side seam. And the amount that you pinch out would become, I'll just cut a line across here. I'm at an awkward angle here, so if I cut like this, and I really don't want this to fall apart, so let me stick a piece of tape there and move the stylus out of the way and cut up to that pivot point. Then what you would be doing is pivoting up like this to shorten the back bodice. You would then need to reposition this dart and retrue it from the waist edge up to the tip of the dart like that, and then your curvature on your waistline is going to become a little bit different. It's going to make this so that usually somebody who's really sway back is going to have to do this. And then if you're making a dress, you would need a dress with a waistline seam so that you could keep that same tune-up into the bodice waist edge. But it also depends where you need this shortening done. Do you need it done in the bodice or do you need it done in the top of the waist? And again, I will refer you to go to SureFitDesignsLearningCenter.com. Go to the video library and go to the category D for dresses. Go to the fitting section, and there you're going to find this in a video on shortening the back. And there is also another way to deal with the sway back there if you happen to have a one-piece garment. So it's all covered in the Learning Center. Let's see, can you review the placement of notches in the armhole? I see different placements from a third down for higher up on the armhole. Is there a specific rule? That also is an absolutely excellent question. Where do you put the notches for the armhole? Well, there is a specific rule, and it is an extremely complicated mathematical formula. And I went through the whole process. When I got it done, I said, that's kind of like about a third of the way up. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to try and explain that to everybody. So I just use a general rule of thumb, a third, and a third. And that's how I do it. And you know what? It works and works well. So just kind of look at your armhole, divide it into thirds, and there you go. That's going to be your notches. And you do the same rule on the front and the back. Okay, I think that brings us up to the end of all of our questions. And I want to thank you so much for asking such interesting questions. I want to thank you all for participating today. And I know I've likely gone over 30 minutes. I hope some of you are still watching, but you'll be seeing us again in another live broadcast in the future. Just watch your Facebook page and my newsletters for the announcements, and we'll see you again in the next month.